In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. This is the day that the Lord has made. It's cold outside. That's what everyone keeps telling me. I haven't been out there in a few hours, so I'll let you tell me that it's cold. But it's still a beautiful day, beloved. It's still a beautiful day. We are rounding out this first week of Lent. It's, as I said before, it's a shock to the body. It's a little bit of a shock to the mind. It's a little pinprick to our heart sometimes when these things take place. We really struggle sometimes without the proper prayer and fasting in our lives. So when we are struggling during fasting and prayer, it's okay. There's a good end to the struggle when we are fasting and praying and we're struggling because of these things. That's a good thing. We'll get stronger. We'll get stronger this way. When we are fasting, when we are praying, and we find our way through this through Christ who strengthens us. And we see that in the lives of those Christians that we commemorate today, not just here in the service that we just finished, but in the life of Saint Theodore, Theodoros of Tyrannos, right? The Saint Theodore the recruit. This story, this beautiful story of the Koliva, this is where we get it from, this wheat that was given to us because we were fasting. Let's not forget, the reason that this infliction came upon us and this miracle came because of the affliction was because we were fasting. There is no other way to look at it. This is a direct result of the fact that we were obedient to Christ. If we were not fasting, this miracle would not have happened. That is a historical fact. This is something we have to keep in mind. The people were fasting from this is the first week of Lent. They were fasting from meat, but especially the meat that had the blood sacrificed to the idols. That's one quick parenthesis that we have to open. The reason why in our society, you go to Greece, they don't eat a whole lot of meat. You eat vegetables, you eat cheese, bread, grains, things like this. We fry a little bit, this kind of stuff, good oils and things like this. We don't eat a whole lot of meat. We'll have lamb on Pascha and other things like this, but it's just on feast days, really. We don't eat a whole lot of it. Fish, yeah, we'll eat fish. But not a whole lot of meat. And so it wasn't in those societies back, almost 2,000 years ago, the meat was not a popular food item. And so people didn't prepare it. And they didn't necessarily always know how to prepare it well, so they would go to the marketplaces and buy it. Well, the meat that was in the marketplaces was often the meat that was left over after being sacrificed to the idols. Because the gods demanded the best meat, the best lambs, the best chickens, the best, these kinds of things. They would demand the best meat, so what was left over was less expensive because it was left over, okay? And, it was of very good quality. And so a lot of people would go to the marketplace and buy the meat there because they could. But the Christians would never do this because it was sacrificed to the idols. Now, in the 4th century, there was a man, Julian the Apostate. He was the emperor. He hated Christians, even though his great-grandfather his great-grand-uncle was a Christian. This is the relative. Julian the Apostate was in the 4th century. His ancestor was Constantine the Great. It was either his great-grand-uncle or his great-grandfather, one of the two. I can't remember which one. But in his lineage, he was emperor after Constantine the Great was emperor because of his relationship to Constantine the Great. And he did not like Christians at all. Constantine the Great did. Julian the Apostate did not. And consequently, to play a joke on the Christians. In the marketplace, not only was the meat sacrificed to the idols, but for the first week of Lent, he poured the blood of that sacrifice on all the food. All of it. Because he knew the Christians wouldn't touch it. Because he knew that they were fasting. And so the people who were going to buy things that they couldn't get on their own, vegetables even, had a little bit of that tainted blood on their food. And so they couldn't buy in the marketplaces without, mixing their food that was sacrificed with this bloody sacrifice, which Jesus Christ said, no more. We don't do that anymore. And so in their haste, they found their local bishop, and the bishop started praying. And they said, everybody, please start praying, because we're going to starve. And they started banding together, trying to help each other, trying to, pull together food and like, okay, this person has a lot of food, go over here. This person has a lot of food, go over here, and just try to spread their wealth so they didn't starve. But it's a large area to cover. So while they were praying, St. Theodore, who had been martyred, 100 plus years before this, appeared in a dream to the bishop and said, hey, go out to this field. I'm going to show you where it is. And you will find a grain of wheat there that you can boil and eat, and it will give you sustenance for the week. You'll live. You all will live. It's not going to taste all that good, but you'll live. If you've ever had coliva before you put anything on it, it really doesn't taste all that good. After you boil it, it's not very flavorful. You got to put like a bunch of stuff on it in order to make it taste good, which is why we put the sugars and all the rest of these things on it. It's a very bitter wheat. I know, I was curious one time when I was making coliva, and anyway, so they lived. And then once Julian realized that he couldn't taint the food anymore and kill the Christians or even bother the Christians, because God was on their side, he stopped. He just, whatever, he just let them go. But this is the miracle that we remember today. This is the reason why the commemoration of St. Theodore, who had departed, was always commemorated with this coliva. And then by extension, over years, it became something that we commemorated other saints with, and then other departed people from our own families who we felt were saints. And that's how it came down to us today, that the memory of the departed, our loved ones who have deceased, are always commemorated with coliva. But it wasn't that way always. It wasn't just a commemoration of our departed, it was commemoration of the saints. And if you go, to different places and different customs in different areas, you will see that when there's a big feast day of a saint, they'll still have coliva. Even though they're not commemorating anyone, it's not a memorial. They'll still bring out like a small bowl of coliva to commemorate the saint. This is part of our Orthodox tradition. This is part of even of our Greek tradition, not just our Orthodox tradition, that we still do this. Not just in commemoration of our deceased parents and relatives, but of the saints themselves, in memory of what St. Theodore, the Tyrannos, the recruit, did today. But all of this, again, because we were fasting. The struggles, the sufferings, the prayers, the almsgiving, the fasting, they all work together. They all work together. And we are supposed to incorporate, we're supposed to bring all of those things into our hearts. We're supposed to, with our hands, do the things to help each other. We're supposed to, with our hearts, pray for those who need the prayers that need it at this time. With our mouths, we are supposed to watch what goes in our mouth so we can be careful what comes out of it. May we have the strength and the courage to keep these things going in our lives so that we can continue, not just for the first week of Lent where we're in, but for the remaining 5 weeks of Great Lent, that we can continue to keep this in our minds and our hearts. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, please rise and we will finish our Divine Liturgy.